Welcome to the What Science Says channel. Get ready for another deep dive. This is where we grab a whole stack of sources. Could be research papers, articles, transcripts, sometimes even online discussions, and we really try to boil it down. Find those key insights, the important facts, maybe the surprising connections.
Exactly. The idea is to sort of guide you through all this information, help make sense of what's actually important, and see how different things connect.
Okay, and based on the available sources, wow, we have a really interesting mix this time.
Yeah, it's quite a range.
We've got everything from super personal online chats about health myths and how people feel, right up to these formal transcripts from a California Legislative Committee hearing talking about big public health policy stuff.
It really is a spectrum. So we'll be looking at, individual beliefs, some historical ideas about the body, and then shifting to these really systemic issues, things like healthcare access, public health strategy. It's health knowledge from the very personal to the huge policy level.
Micro to macro, yeah. Okay, let's jump in. There's one example from the sources that kind of jumps out because it feels almost, well, laughable today. That old saying, masturbation makes you blind.
Right. We mostly just laugh it off now.
Yeah.
But the sources show this wasn't just some throwaway line. It was a seriously held belief. And it has this long history rooted in some specific anxieties and moral judgments.
Really? Like what?
Well, you go back centuries. The sources mention figures like Jean-Jacques Rousseau, the philosopher in the 1780s. He called it a vice.
A vice what?
He linked it to sort of uncontrolled fantasy, sexual desire that wasn't, focused on marriage and having children.
Huh. Okay, so more philosophical, moral.
Initially, yeah. But then it got more medicalized, you could say. Later in the 18th century, there was this Swiss doctor, Samuel Auguste Tisset. He argued that sexual activity, but especially masturbation, because it seemed unnatural to him, led to a depletion of vital fluids.
Vital fluids, right.
And this, he claimed, caused nerve damage, insanity, and specifically, blindness.
Wow. He actually linked it medically.
He did, and the sources point out this idea persisted. You see mentions of the Catholic Church warning against it, and even accounts of nuns in the 1950s still spreading this specific myth, so it carried real weight for a long, long time.
Okay, so that's the history, the fear. Now let's contrast that with what the modern medical sources we looked at say. What's the consensus today?
Oh, it's completely clear. The medical sites are unambiguous. Masturbation does not cause blindness. Period.
Right. Debunked.
Totally debunked. And it doesn't cause those other weird physical things people used to worry about either. Hairy palms, impotence, changes in penis size, low sperm count, physical weakness. None of that holds up.
So basically all those fears were unfounded, medically speaking.
Exactly. In fact, the sources generally frame masturbation, when done in moderation, as a normal, healthy, and pretty much risk-free aspect of human sexuality. Almost the complete opposite of those old warnings.
Now, this is really interesting. One of the sources, that online forum discussion, had someone grapple with that going blind idea in a totally different way.
Yeah, that was fascinating. This user suggested a metaphorical reading.
Metaphorical?
Instead of literal physical blindness, they wondered if going blind could mean losing sight of your life's direction, getting so caught up in seeking pleasure that you can't see your path clearly. You're just sort of navigating life, blindly, figuratively.
That's actually a pretty profound way to think about it.
Yeah.
Taking an old myth and finding a modern psychological meaning.
Yeah. And it apparently got a big reaction in the forum, mind blown. It shows how these old sayings can kind of linger and get reinterpreted even when the original claim is totally false.
Okay, so moving past the blindness myth itself, what other effects or perceptions came up in the sources, both from those personal accounts online and the medical info?
Well, sticking with the online forum for a sec, the experiences were varied. One person shared feeling that excessive porn consumption made them feel kind of numb. They saw it as a way they were coping with depression.
Using it as a coping mechanism.
Right. And another user sort of echoed that metaphorical blindness idea, linking the feeling more to a brain fog. They felt it stopped them from having mental clarity, from really performing at their peak or focusing on their goals.
So even if not physical blindness, some people perceive these mental or emotional effects maybe linked to how or why they're doing it.
Seems so, yeah, for some individuals.
Okay, now what about the more clinical side? What do the medical sources say about effects on the brain, mood, sleep?
Yeah, there are definitely some recognized physiological effects. Masturbation triggers the release of
The
endorphins.
body's natural pain relievers and mood boosters.
Exactly. They can help relieve stress, partly by lowering cortisol levels. And then there's oxytocin, often called the bonding or cuddle hormone, that promotes relaxation and can enhance mood, feelings of happiness.
And dopamine, right, the pleasure chemical.
Yep, dopamine's a key player in the brain's reward system, definitely released during orgasm. And interestingly, some sources suggested that for some people, this dopamine release might actually provide a temporary boost in clarity and focus.
Huh. So some people might actually do it before studying or working.
Apparently, yeah, some individuals report that. But there's nuance here too, of course.
Always is.
The sources also cautioned it's not like a universal focus aid, especially if it's done excessively or like late at night. That can mess with your sleep cycles.
And bad sleep definitely impacts focus and memory. We know that.
For sure. Poor sleep impairs memory consolidation and cognitive function generally. And one source also, sort of cautiously, raised a possibility that very excessive masturbation might, over time, potentially lead to dopamine imbalances,
Right.
affecting the brain's reward pathways. But they were clear, this needs more research. It's not a definite thing.
Okay. Any other physical points noted beyond the debunked myths?
Yes. For males, one source mentioned that using really aggressive techniques, like gripping too tightly, could temporarily decrease sexual sensitivity.
Oh, okay.
But temporary.
Yeah, usually reversible just by changing the technique. And then there was actually a kind of surprising point in one source
Oh, yeah.
about prostate cancer risk. Some preliminary research might suggest, and again, this is tentative, that lower ejaculation frequency could possibly be linked to a higher risk of prostate cancer later in life.
Really? So regular ejaculation might be protective.
It hints at that possibility, yeah.
Yeah.
A potential long-term benefit. Yeah. But the sources stressed, more research is definitely needed to confirm that link and understand why.
Got it.
Okay, let's touch on another common concern mentioned in the sources: fertility. Does masturbation cause infertility?
Yeah, that's a big worry for some people.
And the medical sources.
Again, very clear. Masturbation, done in moderation, does not cause infertility. Full stop.
Okay, but there was a nuance, right, from one source, Ovoria, specifically about trying to conceive.
Yes, exactly. This isn't about causing infertility overall. It's
Yeah.
about optimizing sperm quality right when you need it for conception.
Oh, okay. So what's the advice?
The Ovoria source suggested that for the best possible sperm quality thinking, highest motility, best morphology, all that, whether you're trying naturally or doing IVF, it's generally better for the male partner to avoid ejaculating for about 2 to 3 days beforehand.
So abstaining for a short period concentrates the best quality sperm for that specific attempt at conception.
Precisely. It's a specific strategy for optimizing chances at a particular time. Totally different from the myth that the act itself causes long-term infertility. A really important distinction the sources made.
Absolutely. Okay, huge shift now. We've been deep in personal health, historical myths. Let's switch gears completely to the other major part of our sources. Those transcripts from the California Legislative Committee hearing.
Yeah, this takes us into a totally different world. Public health, policy debates, systemic issues. It's health discussed on a massive scale.
It's such a stark contrast, isn't it? From individual worries to state-level problems affecting millions.
It really highlights how our health isn't just personal. It's deeply tied to the systems and policies around us and the range of issues in that hearing.
Wow. What were some of the big ones that stood out?
Well, access to care was a huge theme. For instance, there was a lot of discussion about getting hearing aids for kids, SB 635, I think it was. They called the lack of access a developmental emergency.
A developmental emergency. Strong words.
Yeah, because hearing loss in childhood can really impact language, learning, social development. So there's this push to make insurance cover hearing aids for young people starting in 2025. But even with that, they talked about challenges like not enough audiologists, especially in some areas.
So even if the law changes, the infrastructure needs to catch up. It shows how complex these things are.
Exactly. Then there was mental health, a major focus, particularly for students. The sources mentioned these alarming student-to-counselor ratios at universities, sometimes hundreds, even over 1,000 students per counselor.
That's staggering. How can one person possibly serve that many students effectively?
Right, and this is in the context of rising mental health challenges and, tragically, suicide risk being a leading cause of death for college-aged youth, as the sources noted. So there were really strong calls for major investment to get more mental health professionals into schools and universities.
Just highlights a massive unmet need.
Definitely. And related to youth health, there was talk about the STI epidemic, chlamydia, syphilis, gonorrhea hitting young people disproportionately hard.
STIs, yeah. What were the proposals there?
Discussions around increasing access to prevention, like HPV vaccines and condoms, SB 541 was mentioned. But also, concerns were raised that condoms don't protect against everything. So, a complex public health challenge.
Okay, what else on the policy front? Cost came up, right?
Oh, yeah, the cost of healthcare was a big one,
Yeah.
especially around fertility treatments like IVF. The sources highlighted how incredibly expensive IVF is.
Making it basically impossible for many people unless they're wealthy or have amazing insurance.
Exactly. And the hearing included these really powerful personal stories, people who lost fertility due to cancer, other issues, facing this enormous financial barrier to having a family. There was strong advocacy for mandating insurance coverage for fertility care, making sure it included LGBTQ plus couples too, who face their own barriers, though some concerns about eligibility criteria were also mentioned.
It really drives home how cost is just this fundamental barrier to accessing life-changing, sometimes life-creating healthcare.
Absolutely. And on costs, there was also this interesting debate about prescription drug prices, SB 873, I believe,
What was the idea there?
trying to lower out-of-pocket costs by making the middlemen, the pharmacy benefit managers or PBMs, share the rebates they negotiate with drug companies directly with patients at the pharmacy counter, like
That-
pass back 90% of the rebate immediately.
Wow, rebates are huge amounts of money, right?
Billions nationally, yeah. The source mentioned over $1 billion in California in just 1 year flowing through these PBMs as rebates. So the argument was, give a chunk of that back to the patient right away, make drugs more affordable. It shows the complexity of that whole drug pricing system.
Definitely. And another recurring frustration mentioned.
Prior authorization. Ugh, this came up repeatedly. That whole process where doctors need insurance company approval before they can give a certain treatment or do a test.
The bureaucratic hurdle.
Exactly. And the testimony included really harrowing examples of how these delays harm patients. People getting sicker, having worse outcomes, sometimes facing devastating consequences because necessary care was held up waiting for insurance companies okay. Both patients and doctors described it as a massive barrier.
Just layers and layers of complexity in the system.
Yeah. And there were other things, too. Addressing youth in crisis with regional teams, SB 408, improving health services for people leaving prison, SB 717, changes to prenatal screening, needing naloxone in schools for overdose risk, a huge range.
And didn't the sources also mention psychedelics? That seems like a hot topic.
They did. SB 58. There was significant debate around psychedelic medicine. Supporters, including veterans and first responders, gave really moving testimony about potential benefits for things like PTSD, depression, using substances like psilocybin.
So arguing for therapeutic potential.
Right, calling for decriminalization or at least a regulated system for therapeutic use. But then you had the opposition voicing concerns, worries about risks, especially if people use them personally without safeguards. They called for more research before making them widely available.
So the classic tension. Potential breakthrough versus potential risk and the need for caution.
Exactly. And the sources noted the bill actually passed that committee hearing despite the concerns. So the conversation around psychedelics is clearly evolving at the policy level.
Wow. Okay, so reflecting on all this, it's quite a journey we've taken through these sources. From like centuries-old personal myths about blindness to these really complex modern-day legislative battles over healthcare access and policy.
It really underscores the incredible breadth and sometimes the contradictory nature of health information and the challenges we face. You've got these historical myths, like with masturbation. Then you have personal anecdotes from online forums, some helpful, some maybe less so. And then you have potentially dangerous misinformation circulating.
Like that eye doctor example? That was chilling.
Yeah, the source mentioning an eye doctor warning about people actually putting things like lime juice or even cement dust in their eyes based on stuff they saw on social media, causing permanent damage, or trying useless eye exercises from YouTube instead of getting proper care.
Oh my God. Cement dust.
It's an extreme example, but it's a powerful reminder from the sources about the real danger of health misinformation and why relying on credible sources, medical professionals, solid research, evidence-based policy is just so crucial.
And that message came through in the medical sources too, right? Healthy behaviors are important, but also seeking professional help. Talking to a doctor, a therapist, if you have concerns, physical or mental, or if you feel like any behavior is excessive or causing negative feelings like guilt or shame.
Absolutely. And connecting it back to the policy stuff, those legislative efforts we saw are trying to fix the bigger systemic problems. Issues like access to care, cost, mental health support, public health crises. They recognize that your individual health isn't just up to you, it's massively influenced by the systems around you.
So your personal health journey happens within this much bigger context of information, misinformation, access, and policy.
Well put, it's all interconnected.
This deep dive has really covered a lot of ground, showing just how many layers there are to thinking about health and well-being.
It certainly has. It really makes you think about how we navigate it all.
So maybe here's a final thought for you, the listener, to chew on. Given this vast ocean of health information out there, everything from personal stories and ancient myths online to hard science to these intricate policy debates, how do you personally sort through it all? How do you make informed choices for your own health? And maybe what's our collective responsibility to make sure reliable information and actual access to care are there for everyone? Thank you for staying with us until the end of this video. Please make sure to subscribe to the What Science Says channel and give us energy with your likes and comments. Share your thoughts with us and send this video to your loved ones so others can benefit from it too.